They say the cruelest betrayal comes wrapped in the skin of someone you once loved. Alpha Ciarán Blackthorn knew this truth intimately. He'd made it his weapon. For 3 years, he stood before the pack and declared her worthless. 3 years of public humiliation, of watching Sorcha Brennan's spirit crack a little more with each denouncement. 3 years of calling her weak, broken, unworthy of the mate bond they'd once shared. But when she finally lifted her eyes to meet his, really met his, everything he thought he knew shattered like ice beneath a wolf's paw. Because those eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at him with nothing but adoration, they suddenly held the impossible. They held her. The Luna he'd lost. The mate who'd died saving their pack. And Sorcha Brennan, the Omega he'd spent years destroying, didn't even know what lived inside her soul. If you're drawn to stories where redemption comes at the highest price, where second chances mean confronting every cruel word you've ever spoken, then you're in the right place. This is a tale of souls that won't stay buried, of love that transcends even death, and of an alpha who must crawl through the ashes of his own making to find forgiveness. Hit that subscribe button now because this story is going to take you to places you never expected. And before we dive deep into Ciarán's reckoning, tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug. Drop it in the comments. Whether you're in Belfast or Bangkok, Brooklyn or Brisbane, I want to know where this story is finding you tonight. Now, let's begin where all the best tragedies do, with a single devastating choice. The Great Hall of Ravencross keeps smelled of pine smoke and old magic, the kind that had seeped into the stone walls over centuries of pack gatherings. Tonight, every member of the Blackthorn pack had assembled, their faces cast in the amber glow of torchlight, their attention fixed on the raised dais where their alpha stood. Ciarán Blackthorn cut an imposing figure, 6'4" of pure muscle and authority, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of winter ice. At 32, he was in his prime, a warrior who'd led the Blackthorn pack through challenges that would have destroyed lesser alphas. His presence alone could silence a room, could make grown wolves drop their gaze in submission. But it wasn't his power that held the crowd's attention tonight. It was what he was about to do. Again. "Bring her forward," Ciarán commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The crowd parted like water, and through that human corridor came Sorcha Brennan, flanked by 2 pack enforcers who weren't quite touching her but made it clear she had no choice in this march. She was small, barely 5'3", with copper-red hair that had once shone like fire but now hung dull and lifeless around her face. Her dress was simple, gray homespun that did nothing to flatter her thin frame. She'd been thin for a while now. 3 years of systematic rejection had a way of stealing a person's appetite. Sorcha kept her eyes down as she walked, her footsteps whisper-quiet against the stone floor. She'd learned long ago that meeting Ciarán's gaze during these proceedings only made things worse. Defiance wasn't rewarded in Ravencross Keep. Not anymore. Not from an Omega. When she reached the base of the dais, she stopped. Waited. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and if you looked closely, if anyone had bothered to look closely, you could see the slight tremor in her fingers. But no one looked closely at Sorcha Brennan anymore. Why would they? The alpha had made his position clear, had made it clear repeatedly for 3 long years. She was nothing, less than nothing. She was the Omega who'd failed her Luna. "Sorcha Brennan," Ciarán began, and his voice was cold, empty of anything resembling warmth. "You stand before this pack once again to hear judgment on your worthiness to remain within our territory." This was the ritual. Every 3 months, like clockwork, Ciarán hauled Sorcha before the pack and reminded her of her failures. It was psychological torture wrapped in the veneer of pack law. Sorcha's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. What was there to say? She'd said it all before in the early days, when she'd still had the strength to defend herself, when she'd still believed that truth mattered. Didn't. Not against grief. Not against the rage of an alpha who'd lost everything. 3 years and 7 months ago, Ciarán continued, pacing across the dais like a predator circling prey, my mate, Luna Eilís Blackthorn, left the safety of Ravencross Keep on a mission that should have been routine. She took with her a small guard, as was appropriate. And she took her handmaiden, the Omega who'd sworn a blood oath to protect her with her life. The crowd murmured. They'd heard this story before, but it never got old. Tragedy had a way of reinforcing itself through repetition, of digging grooves in the collective consciousness that became impossible to escape. That Omega, Ciarán said, stopping his pacing to stare directly at Sorcha, was you. Sorcha finally lifted her head, just enough to see him, just enough to feel the full weight of his hatred pressing down on her like a physical thing. My Luna never returned from that mission, Ciarán said, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, something human flickered in his expression. Raw and unhealed. Then it was gone, replaced by the ice. But you did. Barely scratched. While Eilís and 4 of our finest warriors lay dead in the ruins of an ambush, you somehow survived. I tried to, Sorcha began, her voice hoarse from disuse. Silence. Ciarán's command cracked through the hall like a whip. You had your chance to explain. You had your tribunal. The evidence was clear, you fled. You ran like the coward you are while our Luna fought and died. It wasn't true. None of it was true in the way Ciarán presented it, but Sorcha had learned that facts were malleable things when an alpha was drowning in grief. She tried to tell them what really happened that night. Tried to explain about the dark magic, about how Eilís had ordered her to run, to get help, to survive so someone could warn the pack about what was coming. But magic that dark left few traces. And Sorcha's survival, her lack of significant injuries, her inability to explain why she'd been found 3 miles from the ambush site, it all painted a picture that Ciarán's shattered heart was eager to believe. That she was guilty. That someone had to be guilty. That if she'd just been stronger, faster, more loyal, Eilís might still be alive. An Omega who breaks her blood oath is less than worthless, Ciarán continued, and his voice dropped lower, more dangerous. She is a blight on the pack, a reminder of failure and cowardice. By rights I should cast you out. Let you face the wilderness alone, unmated and unprotected. Sorcha's hands clenched tighter. Exile was a death sentence for a wolf without a pack, especially an Omega. She'd die within weeks, maybe days, torn apart by rogues or worse. But Luna Eilís believed in mercy, Ciarán said. And the way he said his dead mate's name was like a prayer and a curse all at once. She believed that even the weak deserved chances to prove themselves. So I honor her memory by giving you the same mercy she would have shown. You may remain in Ravencross Keep. You may continue to exist on the fringes of this pack. Here it came. The twist of the knife. But make no mistake, Ciarán said, his ice-blue eyes boring into Sorcha's storm-grey ones. You are nothing here. You have no rank, no status, no voice in pack matters. You are tolerated, not welcomed. And every soul in this hall knows exactly what you are, the Omega who let their Luna die. The crowd's murmur rose again, a mixture of agreement and something that might have been pity if Sorcha let herself believe in such things anymore. Do you accept these terms? Ciarán asked, the question rhetorical because they both knew Sorcha had no choice. Accept humiliation or accept death. Choice. I accept, Sorcha whispered, the words tasting like ash. Louder, Ciarán commanded. Let the pack hear your acceptance of your place. Sorcha's spine straightened slightly, a tiny rebellion barely noticeable. I accept, she said more clearly, and hated how steady her voice sounded, how it didn't crack and reveal the screaming inside her. Then we're done here, Ciarán said dismissively, turning away as if she'd already ceased to exist. Back to your quarters, Omega. And remember, you breathe because I allow it. You exist because Eilís would have wanted it. Nothing more. The enforcers moved to escort Sorcha out, but she was already turning, already retreating through the crowd that parted for her not out of respect but out of something closer to disgust. Or maybe just indifference. She wasn't sure which was worse. But as she walked, something strange happened. A sensation she hadn't felt in years. A warmth spreading through her chest, settling near her heart like a coal being blown back to life. It was uncomfortable, almost painful, and completely inexplicable. Sorka's step faltered for just a moment. She pressed a hand to her chest, confusion furrowing her brow. What was that? Felt like something was waking up inside her. Something that had been sleeping so deep she hadn't known it was there. Behind her on the dais, Ciarán felt it too. Pull. A recognition. The ghost of the mate bond he'd shared with Eilís, the one that had died with her, suddenly flickering like a candle in a drafty room. Impossible. He turned sharply, his eyes finding Sorka's retreating form just as she glanced back over her shoulder. Just for a second, their eyes met across the length of the great hall, and Ciarán froze. Because in that moment, Sorka's storm-gray eyes shifted. The color deepened, swirled, and for just a fraction of a heartbeat, they were violet. The same impossible shade of violet that Eilís's eyes had been. The same eyes that had haunted Ciarán's dreams every night for 3 years and 7 months. Then it was gone. Sorka's eyes were gray again, confused and frightened by whatever had just passed between them. She broke the gaze and hurried out of the hall, practically fleeing, leaving Ciarán standing frozen on his dais. No one else had seen it. The moment had been too brief, too private, too impossible. But Ciarán had seen it. And in that single world-tilting second, every certainty he'd built his grief upon began to crack. Sorka didn't sleep that night. How could she, when her chest felt like it was harboring a small sun, warm and insistent and completely wrong? She sat on the narrow bed in her tiny room, barely more than a servant's quarters, tucked away in the oldest part of Ravencross Keep, and tried to understand what was happening to her. The warmth had settled now, less painful but more present. It hummed beneath her skin, in her bones, like a song she'd forgotten she knew. And with it came feelings. Emotions that didn't belong to her. Grief. Overwhelming, crushing grief for a mate lost. But Sorka had never had a mate. She was 25 and unmated, had always been unmated. The mate bond was something she'd heard about, dreamed about in the way lonely Omegas did, but never experienced. So why did her heart ache with a loss she'd never suffered? She pressed both hands to her chest, closing her eyes, trying to push the foreign feelings away. But they wouldn't go. They clung to her, insistent as a memory. Ciarán. The name rose in her mind unbidden, and with it came a flood of something. Recognition. Longing. Love so fierce it was almost violent in its intensity. Sorka's eyes snapped open. Oh, absolutely not. She did not feel those things for Ciarán Blackthorn, the man who'd spent 3 years systematically destroying her, who'd turned her into a pack pariah, who looked at her with nothing but contempt and anger. Yet, the feelings were there, undeniable and impossibly strong. Not her feelings, she was sure of that. They felt like they were coming from somewhere else, somewhere deep inside her that she'd never accessed before. What's happening to me? Sorka whispered to the empty room. The room predictably had no answers. But across Ravencross Keep, in the Alpha's private chambers, Ciarán was asking himself the same question. He stood at the window of his bedroom, staring out at the moonlit forest that surrounded the keep, and tried to rationalize what he'd seen. Tried to convince himself it had been a trick of the light, a momentary hallucination brought on by exhaustion or stress or the constant weight of leadership. But Ciarán Blackthorn hadn't built a reputation as a strong alpha by lying to himself. He'd seen what he'd seen. Sorcha Brennan's eyes had changed. For just a moment they'd been Eilís's eyes. The mate bond scar on his chest, the place where the bond had torn when Eilís died, leaving a metaphysical wound that never fully healed, pulsed with a phantom warmth. It had done that earlier too in the hall, right when he'd locked eyes with Sorcha. "Eilís," Ciarán whispered, his voice raw. "What's happening? Is this... Are you..." He couldn't even finish the thought. It was too impossible, too cruel. The idea that Eilís might somehow be reaching out to him from beyond death, that she might be trying to communicate, to come back. But through Sorcha. Through the Omega he blamed for her death. The universe couldn't be that twisted. Ciarán turned from the window and grabbed the leather jacket hanging by his door. He needed air. He needed to run. He needed to shift and let his wolf take over, because his human mind was going in circles that led nowhere good. He was halfway to the keep's main entrance when a voice stopped him. Alpha. A word. Ciarán turned to find Unak Fitzgerald, the pack's head healer and one of the few wolves who'd known him since childhood. She was in her 60s, with silver hair braided down her back and eyes that missed nothing. Not now, Unak, Ciarán said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. Now, Unak insisted, her tone brooking no argument. There were very few pack members who could speak to their alpha that way. Unak was one of them. In my workroom. Unless you want to have this conversation in the hallway where anyone might hear. That got his attention. Ciarán followed Unak through the winding corridors of Ravencross Keep until they reached her workroom. A cozy space filled with dried herbs, bubbling tinctures, and the comfortable chaos of a healer's domain. Unak closed the door firmly and turned to face him. What did you see tonight? Ciarán's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're. Don't. Unak cut him off. I've known you since you were a pup, Ciarán Blackthorn. I was there when you first shifted. I was there when you met Eilís. And I was there when she died. Her voice softened on that last part. I know grief. I know what it does to people. And I know when something extraordinary is happening. You saw it too, Ciarán said, the words more statement than question. I saw you freeze like you'd been struck by lightning, Unak said. I saw you stare at that poor girl like you'd seen a ghost. And I saw her look just as confused and frightened as you did. She moved to her work table, starting to prepare tea from habit. What happened? Ciarán sank into one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted. Her eyes. Just for a second, Sorcha's eyes. They were violet. Eilís's shade of violet. Unaka's hands stilled over the tea kettle. You're certain. As certain as I've ever been about anything. Ciarán ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of vulnerability. And the mate bond scar. It warmed. Like it used to when Eilís was near me. Unak was quiet for a long moment. Her healer's mind clearly working through possibilities. Finally she spoke. There are old magics in this world, Ciarán. Magics that predate pack law and alpha hierarchy. Soul magic. The kind that the ancient druids used to practice. Soul magic, Ciarán repeated flatly. You think Eilís's soul somehow jumped into Sorcha Brennan? I think, Unak said carefully, that you should stop assuming you know everything about what happened the night Eilís died. You condemned that girl based on circumstantial evidence and your own grief. What if you were wrong? I wasn't wrong, Ciarán said, but there was less conviction in his voice than there had been even an hour ago. The evidence was incomplete, Unak interrupted. There was dark magic at that ambush site. I told you that in my report. I told you there were traces of death magic and soul manipulation. But you didn't want to hear it. You wanted someone to blame, and Sorcha was the only one left alive. The words hit Ciarán like physical blows. 'Cause they were true. He had wanted someone to blame. He'd needed it. Needed to direct his rage and grief at something tangible rather than letting them consume him from the inside. And Sorcha had been there. Alive when Eilís wasn't. Unmarked when his mate lay broken. It had been so easy to make her the villain. What are you suggesting? Ciarán asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm suggesting you talk to her, Unak said. Really talk to her, not at her. Ask her what she's feeling. Ask her what happened tonight. He paused. And maybe consider that the universe is trying to give you something precious. A second chance. Not just with Eilís, but with the truth. Ciarán stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. She let Eilís die. Did she? Unaka's question hung in the air, gentle but unyielding. Or did she survive something terrible and get punished for it? Ciarán didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the foundations of his certainty were crumbling, and he wasn't ready to face what might be underneath. He left Unaka's workroom without another word, but he didn't go for his run. Instead, he found himself walking through the keep's corridors, his feet carrying him almost automatically to the old servant's wing, to Sorcha's door. He stood outside it for a long moment, his hand raised to knock, his entire being caught in an impossible moment of decision. On the other side of that door was either the Omega who'd betrayed his mate, or the key to understanding something that defied everything he thought he knew about life and death and the bonds between souls. Ciarán knocked. The sound echoed in the narrow hallway, soft but definitive. There was a long pause, then the shuffle of feet. The door opened a crack, and Sorcha's face appeared, pale and exhausted and wary. "Alpha," she said, her voice carefully neutral. But her eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were anything but neutral. They were swirling with confusion and fear and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "We need to talk," Ciarán said. Sorcha's hand tightened on the door. "It's late. If this is about..." "It's not about the denouncement," Ciarán interrupted. "It's about what happened after. What you felt. What I saw." Sorcha's breath caught. So she had felt something. The confirmation was written all over her face. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the lie was transparent. "Your eyes changed," Ciarán said bluntly. "They turned violet. Eilís's violet. And you felt something, didn't you? In your chest. A warmth." Sorcha's face went even paler. "How did you?" "Because I felt it too," Ciarán admitted, and the confession cost him something. The mate bond. Or what's left of it. It responded to you. They stared at each other in the dimly lit hallway, two people caught in the crosshairs of something neither of them understood. "I need to come in," Ciarán said. "We need to figure out what's happening. Please." The please did it. Sorcha had never heard Ciarán Blackthorn say please to anyone, let alone to her. It was so unexpected, so completely out of character, that she stepped back and opened the door wider. Ciarán entered her small room, and for the first time in 3 years, really looked at how she'd been living. The narrow bed, the single chair, the complete absence of personal belongings or comfort. This wasn't a room, it was a cell he'd forced her into. Guilt, unfamiliar and uncomfortable, twisted in his gut. "Tell me what you felt," he said, turning to face her. "Every detail." Sorcha wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture that made her look even smaller than she was. "A warmth. In my chest. And then emotions. Feelings that weren't mine." "What kind of feelings?" Sorcha's eyes met his, and there was a challenge in them now, a tiny spark of the defiance he'd thought he'd beaten out of her. "Grief. Love for someone who's gone. Love for..." She stopped, clearly struggling. "Love for you." The air in the room seemed to crystallize. "But they're not my feelings," Sorcha continued quickly. I don't feel those things for you. How could I? You've spent 3 years making my life a living hell." "I know," Ciarán said, and the admission felt like swallowing ground glass. "But those feelings, they sound like what Eilís would have felt. What she did feel for me." "That's impossible," Sorcha whispered. "Is it?" Ciarán moved closer, not threatening but intense. "The ambush that killed Eilís, there was death magic there. Soul magic. Unak detected it in her investigation, but I dismissed it. I was too focused on blaming you to pay attention to the magical evidence." Sorcha's eyes widened. "Soul magic. Like possession. Maybe. Or transference. Or something we don't have names for." Ciarán ran a hand through his hair again, frustrated by his own ignorance. "Look, I don't know the mechanics. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that something changed tonight." "So what are you saying?" Sorcha asked, her voice trembling. "That Luna Eilís is somehow inside me. That when she died, her soul..." "What jumped into mine?" "I don't know," Ciarán admitted. "But we need to find out. Because if there's even a chance..." His voice cracked. "If there's even the smallest chance that Eilís is still here in some form, I have to know." And there it was. The truth beneath all the anger and denouncements and public humiliation. Ciarán Blackthorn was a man drowning in grief, and Sorcha had been his anchor, the weight he'd tied to himself to keep from floating away into madness. But what if she'd never been the villain at all? What if she'd been the key all along? Sorcha sank onto her bed, suddenly unable to stand. "I can't be her," she said softly. "Even if her soul is somehow inside me, I'm not her. I'm not graceful or powerful or worthy of being a Luna. I'm just Sorcha." And in that moment Ciarán heard it, the years of pain and diminishment in her voice. The toll of being called worthless so many times she'd started to believe it. He'd done that. He'd taken a young woman who'd survived something terrible and made her hate herself. The guilt was overwhelming. "I'm sorry," Ciarán said, and the words felt woefully inadequate. "I'm so sorry for what I've put you through. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was—" "Stop," Sorcha said, holding up a hand. "I don't need your apology right now. I need answers. If something is happening to me, if Luna Eilís is somehow connected to me, I deserve to know. Not for your sake, but for mine." She was right. Absolutely right. This wasn't about him or his grief or his guilt. This was about Sorcha and what was happening to her body and soul. "Unak," Ciarán said. "She knows more about soul magic than anyone in the pack. We should talk to her. Together." Sorcha nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. It's too late tonight and I—" She pressed a hand to her chest again. "I need time to process this. To feel whatever this is." Ciarán nodded and moved toward the door, then paused. "Sorcha. What really happened the night Eilís died? Not what the tribunal decided. Not what the evidence suggested. What actually happened?" Sorcha's eyes filled with tears she'd long ago learned not to shed. "We were ambushed. There were things. Not wolves, not exactly. They moved wrong, fought wrong. Dark magic made them. Eilís knew we couldn't win. She ordered me to run to get help. I didn't want to leave her, but she made it a direct command. Luna to handmaiden. I had no choice. Why didn't the tribunal believe you? Because by the time I got back with reinforcements, there was no evidence of dark magic. No bodies of these creatures. Just normal rogues, dead alongside Eilís and the guards. Like someone cleaned up the scene. Made it look like a normal ambush gone wrong. Someone covered it up," Ciarán realized, the pieces finally clicking together. "Someone wanted us to think it was a normal attack. Wanted us distracted by grief and blame instead of investigating further. I tried to tell you," Sorcha said, and now the tears did fall. "I tried so hard to make you believe me. But you looked at me with such hate, such certainty that I was guilty, and after a while I started to wonder if maybe I was. If maybe I should have stayed and died with her." "No," Ciarán said firmly. "No, Sorcha. You followed your Luna's orders. You did what any loyal pack member would do. And I—" He swallowed hard. "I made you suffer for it. For 3 years, I made you pay for crimes you didn't commit." The silence between them was heavy with 3 years of pain and misunderstanding. Finally Ciarán spoke again. "Tomorrow, we talk to Unak. And we find out the truth about the ambush, about the magic, about whatever is connecting you to Eilís now. Promise you, Sorcha. No more denouncements. No more punishment. We're going to figure this out together." Sorcha nodded, not quite trusting his sudden change of heart but too exhausted to fight it. Ciarán left her room and walked back through the quiet corridors of Ravencross Keep. His mind racing. Everything he'd believed for 3 years was unraveling. And at the center of it all was Sorcha Brennan, the Omega he'd wronged in the worst possible way. But perhaps also the Omega who held the key to bringing his mate back from the dead. Or to finally understanding why she'd had to die in the first place. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Sorcha had spent the hours before dawn in a strange half-sleep, filled with dreams that weren't quite her own. She saw memories she'd never lived. Ciarán as a young alpha, awkward and uncertain in his new power. Eilís laughing, her violet eyes bright with joy. The two of them together, the mate bond glowing between them like a visible thread of gold. When Sorcha woke, her face was wet with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy, of recognition, of coming home to someone you loved more than life itself. Except they weren't her tears. Weren't her feelings. The warmth in her chest had grown overnight, spreading through her veins like roots taking hold. It no longer felt foreign. Felt settled. Like it had always been there and was only now making itself known. A soft knock on her door made Sorcha jump. "It's me," came Unaka's voice. "Alpha asked me to fetch you. We have much to discuss." Sorcha dressed quickly in the same simple gray dress. She owned 3, all identical, and opened the door to find the head healer waiting with a kind expression. "How are you feeling, child?" Unaka asked, studying Sorcha with sharp eyes. "Strange," Sorcha admitted. "Like I'm becoming someone else. Or like someone else is becoming me. I can't tell which." Unak nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Come. The Alpha is waiting in my workroom. We'll do some tests, see what we can learn." They walked through Ravencross Keep, and Sorcha noticed how different the castle felt in daylight. Or maybe it was just that she felt different. Less like a prisoner, more like... well, not quite a person yet, but working toward it. Ciarán was already in Unaka's workroom when they arrived, standing by the window with tension radiating from every line of his body. He turned when they entered, and his eyes immediately found Sorcha's. For a long moment they just looked at each other. And Sorcha felt it again, that pull, that recognition. The foreign emotions rising in her chest, making her want to go to him, to comfort him, to... She pushed the feelings down. Those weren't hers to feel. "Sit, both of you," Unak instructed, gesturing to chairs she'd arranged around her work table. "Ciarán has told me about what happened last night. The eye color change, the mate bond reaction, the emotional transference Sorcha is experiencing. Now I need to understand the magic involved." Unak pulled out a worn leather journal filled with handwritten notes and sketches. "After Eilís died, I did extensive research into the magical signatures I detected at the ambush site. What I found troubled me deeply, but the Alpha wasn't interested in hearing about magic. He wanted closure through blame." Ciarán flinched but didn't argue. "The magic used that night was Dreoctonoma, soul draft in the old tongue," Unak continued. "It's ancient magic, banned for centuries because of its instability. The premise is simple but dangerous. It allows a dying soul to be transferred into a living vessel, preserving consciousness and identity beyond physical death." "So Eilís's soul is in Sorcha?" Ciarán asked, leaning forward. "Not quite," Unak said. "Or not completely. Seems the transfer was incomplete. Perhaps interrupted by Eilís's death happening too quickly, or perhaps sabotaged by whoever was trying to kill her. The result is that a portion, maybe half, maybe less, of Eilís's soul merged with Sorcha's that night." Sorcha felt the blood drain from her face. "Half a soul. Is that even possible?" "Souls are more flexible than you'd think," Unak said. "They can split, merge, tangle together. It's not common, but it happens. Usually the results are catastrophic. Madness, death, loss of identity. But you've been functioning normally for 3 years. Which suggests something remarkable." "What?" Sorcha asked. "That Eilís's soul fragment has been dormant inside you," Unak explained. "Sleeping, waiting for the right trigger to awaken. And last night, something triggered it." They all knew what that something was. Ciarán's denouncement. The mate bond responding. The proximity and intensity of emotion finally strong enough to wake the sleeping part of Sorcha's soul that was actually Eilís. Can we separate them?" Ciarán asked, and Sorcha couldn't tell if he was hoping the answer was yes or no. "I don't know," Unak admitted. "This is beyond my skill. We'd need a druid, one trained in soul magic. And those are rare these days. The closest I know of is Podrick O'Sullivan, and he lives on the far side of the Northern Territories. 3 weeks' journey at least." "Then we go," Ciarán said immediately. "Wait," Sorcha interrupted. Don't I get a say in this? It's my body, my soul that's apparently hosting someone else. Both Ciarán and Unak turned to look at her, and Sorcha realized how long it had been since anyone had actually asked her opinion on anything. You're right, Ciarán said after a moment. You do get a say. The most important say. What do you want, Sorcha? It was the first time he'd asked her what she wanted in 3 years. The first time he'd treated her like a person with agency instead of a thing to be judged and dismissed. Sorcha took a deep breath, feeling the warmth in her chest pulse with each heartbeat. I want to understand what's happening to me. I want to know if Luna Eilís is really in here somehow or if I'm just going mad. And I want. She hesitated, then pushed forward. I want to know the truth about that night. About who really killed her and why. Then we're in agreement, Ciarán said. We find Pádraig O'Sullivan. We learn what we can about soul magic. And we investigate the ambush properly this time. He looked at Sorcha with something that might have been respect. Together. Unak smiled. Good. But before you go running off on a 3-week journey, there's something else we need to try. A way to test the soul merger theory and possibly communicate with whatever part of Eilís exists within Sorcha. How? Sorcha asked. A trance state, Unak explained. I can brew a tea that will lower your conscious barriers and allow the dormant soul fragment, if that's what it is, to come forward. It's not possession exactly. More like allowing 2 parts of yourself to speak to each other. That sounds dangerous, Ciarán said. It can be, Unak admitted. If done wrong, it could damage Sorcha's psyche, maybe permanently. But if done right, it could give us answers. And it could let you speak with Eilís one more time. The room fell silent. The weight of that possibility hung in the air like a held breath. Do it, Sorcha said quietly. Sorcha, you don't have to, Ciarán began. Yes, I do, Sorcha interrupted. Because I need to know. I need to know if what I'm feeling is real or if I'm just broken from 3 years of being told I'm worthless. And you need closure. You need to hear from Eilís what really happened. Yes, do it. Unak nodded approvingly. Brave girl. All right. Ciarán, I'll need you to prepare the space. Clear the table and fetch 4 white candles from the supply room. Sorcha, come with me. We need to prepare you. While Ciarán moved furniture, Unak led Sorcha to a smaller adjoining room. Strip to your undergarments, she instructed. I need to draw protection sigils on your skin. If this goes wrong, they'll anchor your soul and prevent fragmentation. Sorcha obeyed, and soon Unak was painting intricate symbols across her shoulders, back, and chest with some kind of herb-infused ink. The symbols tingled where they touched her skin. These are old magic, Unak explained as she worked. Older than the packs, older than the alphas. This is the magic of the land itself, of the wild places where wolves first learned to walk on 2 legs. Do you think it will work? Sorcha asked. The trance. I think you're stronger than you know, Unak said. You survived an ambush that killed 4 warriors and a Luna. You survived 3 years of systematic cruelty without breaking. You have a core of iron in you, Sorcha Brennan. Whatever happens in this trance, I believe you'll come through it intact. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to Sorcha in longer than she could remember. Her throat tightened with emotion. Why are you helping me? Sorcha asked. Everyone else in this pack believes I'm guilty. Unaka's hands paused in their work. I was there when they brought you back. You were barely conscious, covered in blood, most of it not your own. And you were screaming for Eilís. Screaming for your Luna, begging someone to save her, to go back for her. That's not the reaction of someone who fled out of cowardice. That's the reaction of someone who was forced to leave against every instinct. No one believed me, Sorcha whispered. I know. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't push hard enough for a proper investigation. I let the alpha's grief dictate the narrative. Unak finished the last sigil and stepped back. But I'm believing you now. And I'm going to help you find the truth. When they returned to the main workroom, Ciarán had everything prepared. Candles at the 4 cardinal points. The table cleared except for a simple wooden cup filled with steaming tea that smelled of herbs and something else. Something wild and ancient. "This is it," Unak said, handing Sorcha a robe to wear over her undergarments. "Once you drink this, the trance will take hold in a few minutes. You'll feel disoriented at first, like you're floating. Don't fight it. Let yourself drift. And if Eilís's soul fragment is truly within you, it will rise to the surface." "What do I do?" Ciarán asked, and there was barely concealed desperation in his voice. "You stay close," Unak instructed. "If Eilís does emerge, she'll likely be drawn to you. The mate bond was strong between you two. Even in fragment form, it should hold." Sorcha sat in the chair Unak indicated, the wooden cup warm in her hands. She looked at the tea, dark as midnight, surface swirling with what looked like tiny stars, and felt the warmth in her chest pulse harder, as if responding to the proximity of magic. "Last chance to back out," Unak said gently. Sorcha shook her head. "No. I need to do this." She lifted the cup to her lips and drank. The tea was bitter and sweet simultaneously, tasting of autumn leaves and spring flowers and the dark earth between. It burned going down, then spread through her body like liquid starlight. Almost immediately, Sorcha felt the world start to blur at the edges. The candles grew brighter, their flames dancing with colors that shouldn't exist. Unaka's voice seemed to come from very far away when she said, "Breathe, child. Just breathe." Sorcha breathed, in and out, in and out. With each breath, she felt herself sinking deeper into her own consciousness, diving down through layers of thought and memory to someplace she'd never accessed before. And there, at the very center of her being, she found it. Presence. Separate from her but part of her. Sleeping but starting to wake. "Hello." Sorcha thought into the darkness of her own mind. The presence stirred. And when it spoke, it was with a voice Sorcha had only heard in memories that weren't her own. "Sorcha. Oh sweet Sorcha. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." It was Eilís. Luna Eilís Blackthorn, dead for 3 years and 7 months, somehow alive within Sorcha's soul. "Luna." Sorcha's mental voice was trembling. How are you here?" "Soul magic," Eilís replied, and her mental voice was tired, so tired. "I knew we were going to die that night. The ambush was too perfect, too coordinated. They were using dark magic, Sorcha. Magic designed specifically to kill me. I saw it in their eyes. These weren't random rogues. They were sent. Sent by who? I don't know. But I knew I was dying. And I couldn't let it end that way. Couldn't let whoever orchestrated this win completely. So I used the emergency spell my grandmother taught me. A soul preservation technique. I was supposed to transfer entirely into you, to live on through you until we could find a way to restore my body or find me a new one. But something went wrong, Sorcha realized. They had a counterspell running, Eilís explained. Someone among the attackers knew I might try to preserve my soul. The transfer was interrupted, torn apart. Only a fragment of me made it into you. The rest died with my body. Sorcha felt tears running down her physical cheeks, though she was so deep in the trance she couldn't feel them. "You've been inside me this whole time, watching Ciarán punish me for your death." "I was dormant," Eilís said, and there was anguish in her mental voice. The fragment that survived was too small, too weak to maintain consciousness. "I've been sleeping, dreaming. Only last night, when Ciarán's emotions were so strong and you were so close to him, did the mate bond finally pull me awake." This is insane, Sorcha thought. This is absolutely insane. "I know," Eilís said, and there was almost humor in it. "Believe me, I know. Sorcha, I need you to tell Ciarán something. Can you do that?" "Tell him yourself," Sorcha said. "Unak said you could come forward. Talk to him." "Can try," Eilís said. "But I'm weak. I don't know how long I can hold the surface. Will you let me?" It should have felt invasive, the idea of letting another consciousness take control of her body. But Sorcha trusted Eilís. Had always trusted her, even before the Luna's soul took up residence in her own. "Yes," Sorcha said. "Come forward." She felt herself sinking back, creating space, and felt Eilís rising up to take her place. It was the strangest sensation, like being a passenger in her own body, watching through her own eyes but not controlling anything. When Sorcha's eyes opened, they were violet. Ciarán saw the change instantly. One moment, Sorcha was slumped in the chair, eyes closed and breathing steady. The next, she sat up straight, her entire demeanor shifting. Her eyes opened, and they were pure violet, not a hint of gray, just Eilís's impossible shade. And when she looked at him, it was with love so fierce it nearly drove him to his knees. "Ciarán," she said, and it was Sorcha's voice but with Eilís's cadence, Eilís's warmth. "My love. Mimi. I've missed you so much." Ciarán moved without thinking, dropping to his knees in front of the chair and grasping her hands. They were small, Sorcha's hands, not Eilís's, but when they squeezed his back, the grip was familiar. "Eilís." His voice broke on her name. "Is it really you?" "What's left of me?" Eilís said through Sorcha's lips. "I don't have long, love. The trance won't hold me here for more than a few minutes. So listen carefully." "I'm listening," Ciarán said, tears streaming down his face. "Gods, I'm listening." "You have to stop blaming Sorcha," Eilís said urgently. "She saved me that night, or tried to. She fought like a warrior 3 times her size. And when I ordered her to run, she refused until I made it a direct command. Luna to handmaiden, bound by magic. She had no choice but to obey." "I know," Ciarán said. "I know that now. I was wrong. I was so wrong about her." "The ambush was planned," Eilís continued. "Someone wanted me dead specifically. Someone with access to dark magic and knowledge of soul preservation techniques. They tried to make sure I couldn't come back, couldn't tell anyone what I'd learned." "Learned? Learned what?" Eilís's expression, so strange to see on Sorcha's face, grew troubled. "There's a traitor in Ravencross Keep. Someone high up, someone you trust. I'd been investigating pack funds going missing, strange meetings, communications with rogue packs that should have been hostile. The night I died, I was getting close to the truth. Close enough that someone decided I was too dangerous to live." Ciarán felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "Who?" "Eilís, who was it?" "I don't know," Eilís admitted. "I died before I could gather enough evidence. But Ciarán, you need to find them. Because they're still there, still working against the pack. And now that Sorcha and I are connected, now that there's a chance I might fully awaken, we're both in danger." "I'll protect you," Ciarán vowed. "Both of you. I swear it." "I know you will," Eilís said, and she smiled, Sorcha's lips curving in Eilís's familiar expression. "But first, you need to make things right with Sorcha. She's been holding me, keeping my soul fragments safe for 3 years, and you've repaid her with cruelty. She deserves better." "She deserves everything," Ciarán said. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to her if I have to." "Good," Eilís said, and her voice was getting fainter, the violet in her eyes flickering. "I'm fading, love. The trance is wearing off. But know this, I love you. I've always loved you. And whether I stay as a fragment in Sorcha's soul or somehow find a way to fully manifest again, that love will never die." "Eilís." Ciarán reached for her, but she was already sinking back. "Take care of our girl," Eilís whispered. "She's special, Ciarán. More special than either of you know. And she's going to need you in the days ahead." Then the violet flickered and died, replaced by storm gray. Sorcha's eyes. Sorcha's consciousness rising back to the surface. She blinked several times, disoriented, then focused on Ciarán still kneeling in front of her. His hands gripping hers, his face wet with tears. "Did it work?" Sorcha asked, her voice hoarse. Did you get to speak with her?" "Yes," Ciarán said, and he couldn't seem to let go of her hands. "Yes, I spoke with her. And she told me the truth. About that night. About the traitor. About you." Sorcha's eyes widened. "Traitor? Someone in the pack wanted Eilís dead," Ciarán said. "Someone high up. She was investigating them when she was killed." Unak, who'd been standing quietly to the side, finally spoke. Then we have bigger problems than soul fragments. If there's a traitor in Ravencross Keep, they won't stop at killing one Luna. They'll eliminate anyone who threatens to expose them. Including Sorcha, Ciarán realized, protective instincts flaring. If they find out Eilís's soul is partially in her, that she might have Eilís's memories or knowledge. I'll be the next target, Sorcha finished. She pulled her hands from Ciarán's grip and stood up, the robe pooling around her small frame. Then we need to move quickly. Find this druid, figure out if Eilís's soul can be fully awakened, and catch the traitor before they catch us. It's too dangerous, Ciarán said. Sorcha, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, Sorcha interrupted. I'm telling you. This is my life now. My soul that's shared with your dead mate. My safety that's compromised. I'm done being treated like something to be protected or punished. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Or I'll find this druid on my own. Ciarán stared at her, and for the first time, he saw past the small frame and quiet demeanor to the core of steel beneath. Eilís had been right. Sorcha was special. Strong in ways he'd refused to see because it was easier to keep her weak. Equals, he agreed. Partners in this. I'll make the arrangements. We leave for Podrick O'Sullivan's territory tomorrow at dawn. And the pack. Unakas. What do we tell them about the Alpha disappearing with the Omega he's been publicly denouncing for 3 years? Ciarán's jaw tightened. We tell them the truth. That I was wrong. That Sorcha is innocent. And that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. It wouldn't be easy. 3 years of conditioning the pack to see Sorcha as guilty wouldn't vanish overnight. But Ciarán was Alpha. His word was law. And he'd use every ounce of his authority to undo the damage he'd done, even if it cost him everything. The announcement came that evening, during the communal dinner when the entire pack was gathered. Ciarán stood at the head table, Sorcha beside him, the first time she'd been allowed to eat in the main hall in 3 years, and waited for silence. When he had everyone's attention, he spoke. I've called you all here to make an announcement, and to issue an apology. His voice carried through the hall, strong and clear. For 3 years, I have publicly blamed Omega Sorcha Brennan for the death of Luna Eilís. I held her responsible for failing to protect her Luna, and I made her suffer for that perceived failure. The crowd murmured, confused. Where was this going? I was wrong, Ciarán said, and the murmurs turned to shocked silence. Sorcha Brennan is innocent. The ambush that killed Eilís was orchestrated by someone using dark magic. Sorcha fought bravely and followed her Luna's direct orders to seek help. She did everything right, and I punished her for it because I needed someone to blame. He turned to look at Sorcha, who stood pale but steady beside him. I have wronged you, Sorcha Brennan, Ciarán said formally. I have been cruel where I should have been just. I have been blind where I should have seen clearly. And I have made you suffer for my own inability to handle grief. For this I apologize before the entire pack. And I hope that someday you might find it in your heart to forgive me. The silence in the hall was absolute. No one could remember the last time an Alpha had publicly apologized for anything, let alone to an Omega. Sorcha took a breath, then spoke. I accept your apology, Alpha. And I hope that we can work together to find the real truth about what happened that night. We will, Ciarán promised. Which brings me to the second part of this announcement. Sorcha and I will be leaving Ravencross Keep tomorrow on an important journey. We'll be gone for several weeks. In my absence, Beta Fergal will have command of the pack. More murmurs, but no one dared question their Alpha directly. One more thing, Ciarán said, his voice dropping to a tone that promised violence. From this moment forward, Sorcha Brennan is under my personal protection. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or treats her with anything less than the respect due a pack member will answer to me directly. And trust me, you don't want that. The threat hung in the air like a blade. The dinner continued after that, but it was subdued. Everyone was too busy processing what had just happened to do much eating. Sorcha picked at her food, hyper-aware of every eye in the room on her. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly to Ciarán. Yes, I did, he replied. I had to start undoing the damage. And I had to make sure you're safe while we figure this out. Across the hall, in the shadows where the torchlight didn't quite reach, someone watched the exchange with narrowed eyes and growing concern. The plan had been perfect. Kill the Luna, frame the Omega, keep the Alpha distracted with grief while consolidating power. But now everything was falling apart. They'd heard whispers about soul magic, about Eilís somehow being connected to Sorcha. If that was true, if the Luna's consciousness could be restored, all the carefully laid plans would come crashing down. That couldn't be allowed to happen. The Watcher slipped from the hall unnoticed, already forming a new plan. If the Alpha and the Omega were leaving on a journey that presented opportunities, accidents happened on the road. Especially in the wild territories where druids lived. An accident would solve everything. Dawn came cold and gray, mist hanging low over Raven Cross Keep like a shroud. Sorcha stood in the courtyard, a travel pack at her feet, wearing clothes that actually fit her properly for the first time in years. Unak had provided them. Sturdy traveling leathers, a warm cloak, boots that didn't pinch. It felt strange to be dressed like someone who mattered. Ciarán emerged from the keep, similarly packed, followed by Beta Fergal O'Brien, a burly man in his 40s with kind eyes and a warrior's build. You're sure about this? Fergal asked his Alpha quietly. 3 weeks in the wild territories, just the two of you. It's dangerous. I'm sure, Ciarán said. And we won't be completely alone. I've arranged for Finian to meet us at the border. Finian McNeil was one of the pack's best scouts. Young, fast, and absolutely loyal to Ciarán. Having him along would provide extra protection and an extra set of eyes. What about the pack? Fergal pressed. There are tensions after last night's announcement. I know, Ciarán said. Keep them in line, Fergal. Use whatever authority you need. And watch for anything unusual. If Eilís was right about there being a traitor, I'll be vigilant, Fergal promised. You just focus on your quest. Find your answers. And Alpha. He glanced at Sorcha. Maybe find a way to forgive yourself while you're at it. Ciarán nodded, then turned to Sorcha. Ready, was she? Ready to spend 3 weeks traveling with the man who'd made her life hell. Ready to seek out a druid who might confirm she was carrying part of a dead woman's soul. Ready to potentially uncover a conspiracy that could tear the pack apart. Ready, Sorcha said, because what other choice did she have? They left through the main gate, following the northern road that would eventually lead them into the wild territories. Behind them, Raven Cross Keep slowly disappeared into the mist. Neither of them saw the figure that slipped out of a side gate 10 minutes later, following at a careful distance. The first 3 days of travel were awkward. Ciarán and Sorcha barely spoke except when necessary, discussing where to camp, what direction to take, whether to risk a fire. They met Finian as planned at the border, and the young scout's presence helped ease some of the tension. Finian was 24, tall and lean with bright red hair and a quick smile. He'd always been kind to Sorcha, even during the years when kindness toward her was essentially forbidden. It's good to see you properly dressed and fed, Finian said to Sorcha on the second night, when they were sitting around the campfire. You look less like a ghost. I feel less like a ghost, Sorcha admitted. Though I'm not sure what I feel like instead. Like a person, maybe? Finian suggested gently. Sorcha smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in longer than she could remember. Maybe. Ciarán watched the exchange from across the fire, guilt gnawing at him. Finian had been brave enough to show Sorcha basic kindness, even when the Alpha had forbidden it. What did that say about Ciarán's leadership? About his judgment? On the 4th day, they entered the deep forest. Ancient trees that had stood for thousands of years, their branches forming a canopy so thick that even at midday it was twilight beneath them. This was the true wilderness, the places where pack law held no sway and other, older powers ruled. Stay close, Ciarán warned. These woods are home to things that aren't entirely natural. Fey creatures, spirits, and worse. They walked in tight formation, Finian scouting ahead, Ciarán and Sorcha in the middle. The forest was eerily quiet, no birdsong, no rustling of small animals. Just the sound of their footsteps on the leaf-covered ground. Around noon on the 5th day, Sorcha felt it again, that warmth in her chest, pulsing like a second heartbeat. But this time it was different. Not warm but urgent. Almost like a warning. "Something's wrong," she said suddenly. Ciarán stopped immediately. "What do you feel?" "I don't know. Eilís's part of me is agitated. Like she's trying to warn me about something." Finian appeared from the trees ahead. "I found tracks. Fresh ones. Someone's been following us." Ciarán's expression hardened. "Show me." They followed Finian to where the forest floor showed clear boot prints. Someone roughly their size, traveling alone, staying just out of sight. "How long?" Ciarán demanded. "Since we entered the forest at least," Finian said. "Maybe longer. They're good. I almost missed the signs." "The traitor," Sorcha said. "They followed us from Raven Cross. Or sent someone to follow us," Ciarán corrected. "Either way, we're being hunted." "What do we do?" Finian asked. Ciarán thought for a moment. "We can't outrun them. Not in terrain they're clearly familiar with. So we set a trap. Finian, you're the fastest. Loop back and come up behind whoever's following us. Sorcha and I will make camp early. Make it look like we suspect nothing. When our follower approaches, we'll have them surrounded." It was a solid plan. They set it in motion immediately. Finian disappearing into the forest like smoke while Ciarán and Sorcha made an obvious show of setting up camp in a small clearing. They built a fire, laid out bedrolls, acted like two travelers with no idea they were being stalked. As darkness fell, Sorcha sat close to the fire, every nerve on edge. The warmth in her chest continued to pulse urgently, and she found herself wishing she could communicate with Eilís more clearly. Ask her what the danger was, where it was coming from. Ciarán sat across from her, appearing relaxed but clearly ready to spring into action at any moment. "Sorcha," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tonight, stay behind me." "I'm not helpless," Sorcha replied, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "I know," Ciarán said. "But you're also not trained for combat. And I've spent 3 years making you a target. I need to protect you." "Because Eilís is in me," Sorcha said flatly. "Because you're my responsibility," Ciarán corrected. "And because you matter. Not just as a vessel for Eilís's soul, but as yourself. I'm starting to see that. And I'm sorry it took me so long." Before Sorcha could respond, a twig snapped in the darkness beyond the fire's light. Both of them tensed. Ciarán's hand moved slowly to the knife at his belt. Another sound, this time from a different direction. Whoever was out there was circling them. Then a voice emerged from the darkness, cold and familiar. Well, the Alpha and his pet Omega, all alone in the wild woods. How convenient. A figure stepped into the firelight, and Sorcha's breath caught. It was Niamh Kavanagh, one of the pack's senior warriors. A woman Eilís had trusted. A woman who'd stood silent for 3 years while Sorcha was denounced and degraded. "Niamh," Ciarán said, standing slowly. "What are you doing here?" "Following orders," Niamh said with a cold smile. "Well, my own orders, actually. You see, Ciarán, your little apology tour has created a problem. Big problem. And problems need to be solved." "You're the traitor," Sorcha realized, also standing. "You killed Eilís." "I facilitated her death," Niamh corrected. "I didn't do the actual killing. I hired specialists for that. Dark mages who could ensure that even her soul wouldn't survive. But apparently they failed. Apparently some part of your precious Luna made it into this pathetic Omega." "Why?" Ciarán demanded, and his voice was deadly. "Eilís trusted you. We all trusted you. And she was going to destroy everything," Niamh spat. "She discovered the truth, that I've been working with the Northern Pacts to stage a takeover. That I've been siphoning resources, building alliances, preparing to remove you as alpha and install someone more amenable to my plans. You'd betray your own pack for power? Ciarán's eyes were glowing now, his wolf rising to the surface. I'd do whatever it takes to survive, Niamh said. And right now that means eliminating both of you. The alpha who finally figured out I exist, and the omega who might remember what Eilís knew. She moved fast, faster than should have been possible, pulling a silver blade and lunging for Sorcha. But Ciarán was faster. He shifted mid-leap, his body exploding into his wolf form, a massive black beast with ice-blue eyes. He intercepted Niamh, his jaws snapping inches from her throat. Niamh rolled away, her own shift taking her. She was a brown and grey wolf, smaller than Ciarán but clearly experienced in combat. They clashed in a fury of teeth and claws, and Sorcha stumbled back, suddenly very aware that she was completely helpless in a fight between two powerful wolves. But the warmth in her chest was surging now, stronger than it had ever been. And with it came a voice, not external but internal. Eilís, speaking directly into her consciousness. The knife, Sorcha. The silver knife Niamh dropped. Pick it up. Sorcha saw it glinting in the firelight, half hidden in the leaves. She scrambled for it, her fingers closing around the hilt just as Finian burst from the trees behind Niamh. The young scout had shifted too, his red wolf form leaping onto Niamh's back, teeth sinking into her shoulder. Niamh howled and threw Finian off, but the distraction was enough. Ciarán pinned her, his massive paws on her chest, his jaws around her throat, not breaking the skin but making it clear that he could, instantly if she moved wrong. Tell him to make her shift back, Eilís's voice said in Sorcha's head. We need answers, not a dead traitor. Ciarán, Sorcha called. Make her shift back. We need to know who else is involved. Ciarán's wolf eyes found Sorcha's, and after a long moment, he shifted back to human form, still pinning Niamh. Shift, he commanded, using every ounce of alpha authority in his voice. Niamh had no choice. The alpha command forced her shift, leaving her naked and bleeding from several deep cuts. Who else? Ciarán demanded. Who else is part of this conspiracy? Niamh laughed, and blood bubbled between her lips. You think I'm going to tell you? You think? She never finished the sentence. Her eyes went wide, her body convulsed once, and then she was still. Sorcha gasped. What happened? Finian, who'd shifted back to human, moved closer and examined Niamh's body. Poison, he said grimly. There's a capsule in her teeth. She bit down on it. Probably cyanide or something similar. She's dead. Damn it. Ciarán slammed his fist into the ground beside Niamh's corpse. We needed her alive. We needed to know who else is involved. There are others, Eilís's voice said in Sorcha's head. Can feel it. This wasn't just Niamh. She was working with at least 2 or 3 others in the pack. Maybe more. Eilís says there are more conspirators, Sorcha said aloud. This wasn't just Niamh. Both men turned to look at her. Eilís is speaking to you, Ciarán asked. Right now. Yes, Sorcha said. It's getting easier. The connection is getting stronger. She's been more active since we entered the forest. Maybe because we're in a place of old magic, closer to the druid's territory. Tell him we need to move quickly, Eilís urged. If Niamh doesn't report back, the others will know their plan failed. They'll either go into hiding or make their move to take over the pack. Either way, Ravencross Keep is in danger. Sorcha relayed the message, and Ciarán's expression grew even grimmer. We're 3 days from Podrig's territory, he said. We could turn back, return to Ravencross, try to root out the conspirators ourselves. Or we could finish what we started, Finian said. Find the druid, see if he can fully awaken Luna Eilís. If she has her full memories, her full consciousness, she might know exactly who the other traitors are. It was a gamble. 3 more days pushing forward versus 3 days racing back to a pack that might already be falling apart. Forward, Eilís's voice said firmly. We need to see this through. And Ciarán. Tell him I trust Fergal. He'll keep the pack safe until we return. Eilís says to go forward, Sorcha said. She trusts Fergal to hold the pack until we get back with answers. Ciarán was silent for a long moment, torn between his instincts as an alpha to protect his pack and his need to see this through. Finally he nodded. We push forward, he decided. But we move fast and stay alert. If Niamh found us, others might too. Finian, can you cover our trail? I'll do my best, Finian said. But, Alpha, we need to deal with the body. We can't just leave her here. They spent the next hour burying Niamh's corpse deep in the forest floor, marking the spot so they could potentially return for a proper pack burial later. It felt wrong disposing of a pack member like this, but they had no choice. As they worked, Sorcha felt the warmth in her chest settle into something more constant, more present. Eilís's consciousness was definitely growing stronger. And with it came fragments of memory, not full scenes but flashes. Niamh laughing at something Eilís had said. Niamh standing in shadows, speaking to someone Eilís couldn't quite see. Niamh's face, twisted with determination, as she made a choice that would lead to murder. She wasn't always like this, Sorcha said quietly as they patted down the last of the earth over the grave. Eilís remembers when Niamh was loyal. Something changed her. Power changes everyone, Ciarán said bitterly. I should have seen it. Should have noticed the signs. You were grieving, Sorcha pointed out. And she was counting on that. On you being too distracted to see what was right in front of you. They left the makeshift grave and pushed deeper into the forest, traveling through the night now, not daring to stop. The trees grew even more ancient, their bark marked with symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Old druid markings, Ciarán explained. They were getting close. On the 6th day, as dawn broke through the canopy in shafts of golden light, they finally emerged into a clearing unlike anything Sorcha had ever seen. The trees here formed a perfect circle, their branches interwoven overhead to create a living dome. In the center stood a stone cottage, small and ancient, covered in moss and surrounded by gardens that seemed to grow without any logical pattern. Herbs mixed with flowers mixed with vegetables in a riot of color and life. And standing in front of the cottage, as if he'd been expecting them all along, was an old man. Pádraig O'Sullivan was impossibly ancient, with skin like worn leather and eyes that held the green of deep forests. His hair and beard were long and white, braided with small bones and feathers and crystals. He wore robes of undyed wool, and he leaned on a staff carved with more of those glowing symbols. Alpha Ciarán Blackthorn, Pádraig said. His voice surprisingly strong for someone so old. And Omega Sorcha Brennan. Or should I say, Omega Sorcha Brennan and Eilís Blackthorn sharing one body. I wondered when you'd finally make it here. Sorcha felt her jaw drop. You know. About Eilís. Child, I've known since the night it happened, Pádraig said with a slight smile. I felt the soul magic from here. Felt Eilís's essence split and scatter. Felt part of it take root in you. He turned his ancient eyes on Ciarán. And I felt this one's grief and rage poison the very air around Ravencross Keep. You've made quite a mess of things, young Alpha. Can you help us? Ciarán asked, cutting straight to the point. Can you fully awaken Eilís? Restore her consciousness completely? Pádraig tilted his head, studying them both. The better question is, should I help you? Soul magic is forbidden for a reason. The dead should stay dead. Spirits should move on to whatever comes next. Trapping a soul fragment in a living vessel is unnatural. Cruel, even. Eilís chose this, Sorcha said, stepping forward despite her fear of the old druid. She used the magic to preserve herself, to keep her knowledge alive. And now we need that knowledge to save the pack from traitors who wanted her dead. Ah yes, the conspiracy, Pádraig said. I suppose you figured out that Niamh Kavanagh was only the tip of that particular rot? You knew about the conspiracy. Ciarán's voice was dangerous now. You knew and you didn't warn us. It's not my place to interfere in pack politics, Pádraig said calmly. I tend the old magic, preserve the ancient knowledge, help those who seek me out. But I don't march into packed territories and start making accusations. That's a good way to get myself killed. He paused. Besides, Eilís needed time. Time for what? Sorcha asked. To integrate, Podrick explained. When a soul fragment merges with another soul, it needs time to settle to find its place. If I'd awakened her immediately 3 years ago, it would have torn you both apart, Sorcha. You'd have lost your mind, and Eilís's fragment would have dissipated. But now you've had 3 years to unknowingly adjust to each other. Now the merger is stable. Now it might be possible to bring her fully forward without destroying you. Might be. Sorcha caught the qualifier. Soul magic is not an exact science, Podrick admitted. There are risks. Always risks. But come inside. Let me examine you properly, and we'll see what can be done. They followed him into the cottage, which was somehow much larger on the inside than it appeared from outside. Another bit of druid magic. The interior was cluttered with books, scrolls, jars of strange ingredients, and artifacts Sorcha couldn't begin to identify. Podrick gestured for Sorcha to sit in a chair surrounded by what looked like a circle of standing stones, miniature versions of the great Henges. Sit. Relax. This won't hurt, but it will feel strange. Sorcha sat, and immediately felt the stones begin to hum with power. Podrick circled her, his staff tapping the ground rhythmically. His voice rising in a language Sorcha didn't recognize. The old tongue, older than the Pax, older than written history. The warmth in her chest flared, and suddenly Eilís's voice was clear in her head, clearer than it had ever been. I can feel him working. Feel him seeing us. Sorcha, this is it. If he can do this, if he can fully awaken me, I can tell you everything. Every name, every detail of the conspiracy. But what happens to me? Sorcha thought back. If you fully awaken, do I disappear? No, Eilís said firmly. We share this body, this life. We'll both be here. 2 souls, 1 vessel. It's rare but not impossible. Podrick stopped chanting and opened his eyes. Fascinating, he breathed. You two are more integrated than I thought. Your souls have actually begun to braid together. Not just sitting side by side but actively intertwining. In another few years, you'd be impossible to separate. You'd be one entirely new person. Is that good or bad? Ciarán asked from where he stood with Finian near the door. Neither. It simply is, Podrick said. But it means awakening Eilís fully won't tear Sorcha apart. Instead, it will create something unique. A dual consciousness, 2 minds in 1 body, sharing thoughts and memories and experiences. Can you do it? Sorcha asked. Yes, Podrick said. But once I do, there's no going back. You won't be just Sorcha anymore. And Eilís won't be just Eilís. You'll be both. Always. For the rest of your life. Are you prepared for that? Sorcha looked at Ciarán, who looked back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hope, fear, longing. Then she felt Eilís's presence in her mind, warm and encouraging. I know it's asking a lot, Eilís said. Sharing your entire existence with someone else. But Sorcha, I promise you, we'll be partners in this. Quills. And maybe together we can be something neither of us could be alone. Sorcha took a deep breath. 3 years ago, she'd been alone, broken, convinced she had no value. Now she had a chance to be more than she'd ever imagined. To carry forward the legacy of a Luna who'd died protecting her pack. To be part of something greater. I'm prepared, Sorcha said. Do it. Podrick nodded and began the ritual in earnest. The ritual took 3 days. Podrick explained that awakening a dormant soul fragment wasn't like flipping a switch. It required careful coaxing, layer by layer, memory by memory, until Eilís's consciousness could fully emerge without damaging Sorcha's psyche. During those 3 days, Sorcha barely left the circle of stones. She sat in a trance state, neither fully asleep nor fully awake, while Podrick worked his magic. And in that liminal space, she and Eilís finally met properly. Not as passenger and host, not as fragment and whole, but as 2 souls standing in a space that belonged to both of them. Eilís appeared as Sorcha remembered her from life, tall and elegant, with long dark hair and those striking violet eyes. She wore the simple dress she'd died in, and there was a sadness in her expression that went bone deep. "Thank you," Eilís said, "for carrying me, for keeping me safe, even when you didn't know I was there." "I didn't have much choice," Sorcha said, but there was no bitterness in it. Just statement of fact. "I know. And I'm sorry for that. Sorry you got caught up in this. Sorry Ciarán punished you for my death." Eilís moved closer. "But I'm grateful too. 'Cause you're strong, Sorcha. Stronger than I ever was. You survived things that would have broken me." "I survived because I didn't have a choice," Sorcha said. "And barely survived at that." "But you did survive," Eilís insisted. "And now, if you'll let me, I'd like to help you do more than just survive. I'd like to help you thrive." "As what? Two people in one body? How does that even work?" "Pádraig says our souls are braiding together," Eilís explained. "That means our thoughts, memories, skills, they're all starting to merge. You'll have access to everything I knew. My training as Luna, my strategic mind, my combat skills. And I'll have access to your resilience, your compassion, your ability to endure. So we become one person," Sorcha asked. "Or we become something new," Eilís suggested. "Neither you nor me but both. Synthesis. Something that's never existed before." Sorcha considered this. It should have terrified her, the idea of losing herself so completely. But strangely it didn't. Maybe because she'd already lost so much of herself over the past 3 years. Maybe because the idea of being more than she was, stronger, smarter, more capable, was too tempting to resist. "All right," Sorcha said. "Let's do this. Let's become something new." Eilís smiled, and it transformed her sad face into something radiant. "Together then. Partners. Sisters. Whatever we need to be." They clasped hands, and Sorcha felt the warmth in her chest explode into light. Ciarán watched from outside the circle as Sorcha's body began to glow with a soft golden light. Pádraig had warned him this would happen, that the awakening would manifest physically, but seeing it was still incredible. The light grew brighter, filling the cottage, and then suddenly it contracted, pulling back into Sorcha's body like a reverse explosion. Sorcha gasped and opened her eyes. Except they weren't just gray anymore. And they weren't just violet. They were both. Gray shot through with veins of violet, swirling together like storm clouds and twilight. "Sorcha," Ciarán asked carefully, moving closer. "Eilís." The woman in the chair smiled, and it was neither Sorcha's shy smile nor Eilís's regal one. It was something entirely new. "Both," she said, and her voice carried harmonics of both women. "And neither are integrated now, fully merged." She stood, and her movements were different, more graceful than Sorcha had been, but with a groundedness that Eilís had sometimes lacked. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers, testing this body that now belonged to two souls. "How do you feel?" Pádraig asked, studying her with professional interest. "Complete," she said. "For the first time in either of our lives we feel complete. Sorcha's strength and Eilís's knowledge combined. We're more than we were separately." "And your memories?" Ciarán asked. "Do you remember?" "Everything?" "Everything," she confirmed, and her expression grew serious. "Including the full extent of the conspiracy." "Ciarán, it's worse than you know. Niamh was working with 3 others in the pack. Brendan O'Neill, Maeve Donnelly, and Seamus Lynch. All senior members. All trusted." Ciarán felt like he'd been punched. Brendan was his third in command. Maeve ran the pack's finances. Seamus was the master-at-arms. "That's why the evidence from the ambush disappeared," she continued. "Seamus controlled the investigation. He made sure nothing pointed to dark magic or conspiracy. And Maeve's been funneling pack resources to buy loyalty in the Northern Territories, building an army ready to overthrow you." "We have to get back," Ciarán said. "Now, if they realize Niamh is dead, they'll make their move." "They may have already," Finian said grimly. He'd been standing watch at the door and now gestured outside. Alpha, you need to see this. They rushed outside to find the sky to the south, the direction of Ravencross Keep, dark with smoke. Not the clean smoke of cooking fires, but the thick black smoke of buildings burning. No, Ciarán breathed. No, no, no. They've made their move, Sorcha Brennan said, and her dual voice was cold with fury. They're burning Ravencross Keep. How long to get back? Ciarán demanded of Finian. 3 days at normal pace. Maybe 2 if we push hard and don't stop. We run, Ciarán decided. We shift and we run, and we don't stop until we reach Ravencross. Podrick. I'll come as well, the old druid said, surprising them all. You'll need someone who can counter dark magic, and I'm the only one here qualified. Besides, it's been a while since I had a good fight. Despite the urgency, Ciarán managed a grim smile. Then let's go. Ravencross needs its alpha. They shifted, all except Podrick, who had his own methods of travel, and ran. For 2 days and nights, they ran without stopping, pushing their wolf forms to the absolute limit. Ciarán Eilís ran on 4 legs for the first time with full Luna training backing her movements, and she was magnificent, faster and more graceful than Sorcha had ever been alone, with endurance that shouldn't have been possible for her smaller frame. The merger had changed her physically too. She was still small, still had Sorcha's copper-red hair and delicate features, but there was something different in the way she moved, the way she held herself. Power and confidence that hadn't been there before. On the dawn of the 3rd day, they crested the hill overlooking Ravencross Keep and stopped, panting, to survey the damage. The main keep still stood, but several of the outer buildings were burned husks. They could see fighting in the courtyard, pack members against pack members, civil war made manifest. And on the walls they could see 3 figures directing the attack. Brendan. Miss. Fergal. Ciarán called out through the pack bond, the mental connection every alpha shared with their beta. There was a long, terrible silence. Then faintly, Alpha. You're alive. Thank the gods. We're holding the keep, but barely. Traitors have static. The bond flickering. Fergal's hurt, Ciarán said. We need to end this. Now. I'll handle the dark magic, Podrick said, appearing beside them in a swirl of green light. You handle the traitors. They charged down the hill as one, a furious pack of righteousness and rage. The battle for Ravencross Keep would be remembered in pack history for generations. Alpha Ciarán Blackthorn burst through the front gates in his massive black wolf form, a roar of pure authority ripping from his throat. The sound froze every wolf in the courtyard, traitor and loyal alike, because it carried the undeniable weight of alpha command. Behind him came Finian and Ciarán Eilís, and behind them came something that made even hardened warriors hesitate. Podrick O'Sullivan, glowing with green druidic fire, his staff raised and his voice chanting in the old tongue. The dark magic that had been bolstering the traitors' forces suddenly evaporated like morning mist, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. Stand down! Ciarán's voice, even in wolf form, carried absolute command. By my authority as Alpha, I order every wolf in this keep to stand down and shift to human form. The Alpha command was irresistible. One by one, the wolves shifted, leaving naked, confused pack members standing in the courtyard. All except 3. Brendan, Maeve, and Seamus had prepared for this. They'd taken the same poison capsules that Niamh had, ready to die rather than face justice. But Ciarán Eilís was faster. She shifted mid-leap, landing in human form and touching each of the 3 traitors before they could bite down on their capsules. And in that touch, she channeled something new, a combination of Eilís's Luna authority and Sorcha's newfound power, merged and amplified. The traitors froze, unable to complete the motion to kill themselves. You will face justice, Ciarán Eilís said, and her dual voice carried through the courtyard. You will answer for your crimes. And you will tell us everything. Ciarán shifted back to human form and stalked toward the 3 frozen traitors. Brendan O'Neill, Maeve Donnelly, Seamus Lynch. You stand accused of conspiracy, murder, and treason against the Blackthorn pack. Do you deny these charges? We did what was necessary, Brendan spat, though he couldn't move. You were weak, Ciarán. Weak and distracted by grief. The pack needed strong leadership. So you killed my mate. Ciarán's voice was deadly quiet. We eliminated an obstacle, Maeve said. Eilís was getting too close to our plans. She had to go. And framing Sorcha, Ciarán continued. Making her suffer for 3 years. That was just convenient. That was inspired, Seamus said with a cruel smile. Keep you focused on her, and you'd never look elsewhere for the real culprits. Worked perfectly. Until now, Ciarán Eilís said, stepping forward. She looked at the 3 traitors, and her eyes blazed with violet and grey fire. You killed me once, tormented Sorcha for years, and nearly destroyed this pack. But you failed, because we're stronger together than you ever imagined. She released them from the paralysis, but Ciarán's enforcers were already there, binding them with silver chains that prevented shifting. Take them to the cells, Ciarán ordered. They'll face formal trial before the entire pack. And this time there will be no poison capsules, no easy deaths. They'll answer for everything. As the traitors were dragged away, Ciarán finally allowed himself to survey the true damage. The outer buildings could be rebuilt. The injured could be healed. But the trust that had been broken, that would take much longer to repair. Fergal emerged from the keep, limping and bloody but alive. Alpha, he said, relief clear in his voice. You came back. Always, Ciarán said, embracing his beta carefully. How many did we lose? 17 dead. 34 wounded. Could have been much worse if we hadn't been able to hold the keep itself. Fergal looked past Ciarán to where Ciarán Eilís stood. His eyes widened. Luna. But and Sorcha, how? It's complicated, Ciarán Eilís said with a slight smile. But yes, Beta Fergal. Both of us are here now. 2 souls, 1 body. And we're not going anywhere. The trial of the 3 traitors took place 1 week after the battle, once the injured had been tended and the dead had been properly mourned. The entire pack assembled in the Great Hall, the same hall where Ciarán had denounced Sorcha so many times, but now it was for true justice. The evidence was overwhelming. Under the effects of a truth serum Podrick had provided, the 3 conspirators had no choice but to confess everything. Their plan to take over the pack. Their hiring of dark mages to kill Eilís. Their systematic cover-up and framing of Sorcha. Their attempts to consolidate power while Ciarán was distracted by grief. The pack listened in horrified silence as the full extent of the betrayal was revealed. When the confessions were complete, Ciarán stood to pass judgment. For the crimes of murder, conspiracy, and treason, I sentence you to exile, he declared. You will be stripped of your pack bonds, cast out into the wild territories, and forbidden from ever setting foot in Blackthorn lands again. You will live or die by your own strength, as wolves without pack or purpose. It was a harsh sentence but fair. Death would have been kinder, and exile was a slow death sentence for wolves who'd grown used to pack life. The 3 were stripped of their bonds in a ritual that left them screaming, the severing of pack connection a pain worse than any physical wound. Then they were escorted to the border and cast out. When it was done, Ciarán turned to face his pack. I have been a poor alpha, he said, and his voice carried no pride, only humility. I allowed my grief to blind me to traitors in our midst. I allowed my rage to target the innocent. I failed in my duty to protect all members of this pack, and for that I am truly sorry. He paused, then gestured to where Ciarán Eilís stood at the base of the dais. But I have been given a second chance, Ciarán continued. A chance to make things right. A chance to be the alpha this pack deserves. And I won't waste it. He walked down from the dais and took Ciarán Eilís's hand, raising it high. 3 years ago I wronged this woman, Ciarán said. I called her coward and failure. I made her a pariah. I was cruel where I should have been just. And I nearly destroyed someone precious because I couldn't see past my own pain. He turned to face her directly. Sorcha Brennan. Eilís Blackthorn. Two souls sharing one body. Two spirits united in purpose. You are both heroes. You are both survivors. And you are both. He swallowed hard. You are both my mate. The mate bond suddenly flared to life between them, visible to everyone in the hall as golden light. But it was different from before. Not the single thread that had connected Ciarán and Eilís, but a triple braid. One thread connecting Ciarán to Eilís. One connecting Ciarán to Sorcha. And one connecting Eilís to Sorcha, binding all three of them together in a bond that shouldn't exist but did. The mate bond has reformed, Podrick confirmed from his place of honor near the dais. Different from before but stronger. This is a true triad bond. Rare, powerful, and unbreakable. Sorcha and Eilís stared at the golden light connecting her to Ciarán, feeling the bond settle into place with a rightness that went soul deep. Both of us? She asked quietly. You can accept both of us? I love Eilís, Ciarán said simply. I always will. But I'm also falling in love with Sorcha, with your strength, your resilience, your capacity for forgiveness that I don't deserve. And whoever you are now, this merged person you've become, I want to know her too. Want to be worthy of her. Of us, Sorcha and Eilís corrected gently. There are two of us in here. And we. She paused, and a smile spread across her face. Joy and hope and possibility all mixed together. We love you too. Both of us. Separately and together. Ciarán pulled her into his arms, and the mate bond blazed brighter. Around them the pack erupted in cheers. Because this was what they needed, hope. Renewal. Proof that even the worst betrayals could lead to something beautiful. When the celebration finally died down, Ciarán made one final announcement. Sorcha and Eilís Blackthorn, he said formally. Will you accept the position of Luna of the Blackthorn pack? Will you lead beside me, guide our people, and help me rebuild what was broken? There was no hesitation. Yes, she said. We accept. And we will help you make this pack stronger than it's ever been. The restoration of Ravencross Keep took months. But with every building repaired, every wound healed, every broken trust slowly mended, the pack grew stronger. Sorcha and Eilís proved to be a remarkable Luna. She had Eilís's strategic mind and diplomatic skills, combined with Sorcha's compassion and understanding of what it meant to suffer. She was fair but firm, gentle but strong, and she quickly won the respect of pack members who had once treated her as worthless. She also insisted on creating new pack laws, protections for Omegas, better investigation protocols for crimes, transparency in leadership decisions. Changes that would prevent another tragedy like hers from ever happening again. Ciarán supported her in everything, and together they became a formidable team. The Alpha who'd learned humility and the Luna who'd learned her own worth. Some nights, when they lay together in the Alpha's chambers, Ciarán would ask which one he was talking to, Sorcha or Eilís. And she'd smile and say, Does it matter? We're both here. We're both yours. And gradually, Ciarán learned that it didn't matter. Because she was right, they were both there, both present, both his mates. And he loved the combined whole of them more than he'd ever thought possible. 1 year after the awakening, Podrick returned to Ravencross Keep for a visit. He examined Sorcha and Eilís carefully and nodded with satisfaction. The soul braid is complete, he said. You're not two souls coexisting anymore. You've become something entirely new. A true synthesis. Neither Sorcha nor Eilís alone, but both and more. Is that a good thing? She asked. It's an extraordinary thing, Podrick corrected. You're unique in all the world. A Luna who's lived 2 lives, survived 2 deaths, and emerged stronger than either soul could have been alone. I believe you're going to do remarkable things. He was right. Under the leadership of Alpha Ciarán and Luna Sorcha Eilís, the Blackthorn pack flourished. They formed alliances with neighboring packs, rooted out corruption wherever they found it, and became known throughout the territories as just and honorable leaders. And every 3 months, on the anniversary of the first denouncement, Sorcha Eilís stood before the pack not to be judged, but to remind them all of an important truth. That worth is not determined by rank or status. that strength comes in many forms, that the broken can be made whole, and that sometimes, the cruelest endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Years later, when young wolves asked Luna Sorcha Eilís about her unusual dual nature, she would smile and tell them the truth. "I was two people who should never have survived," she'd say. "An Omega broken by cruelty, and a Luna killed by betrayal. Separately we would have been lost. But together, we became something neither of us could have been alone. We became whole." And when they asked how she'd forgiven Alpha Ciarán for his cruelty, her smile would turn sad but understanding. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," she'd explain. "It's understanding that hurt people. It's recognizing that everyone deserves a chance at redemption if they're willing to do the work. And it's knowing that holding on to anger only poisons yourself." She'd pause, then add, "Besides, the best revenge against those who hurt you isn't making them suffer. It's becoming so magnificent that their cruelty seems laughable in comparison. That's what we did. What we became. And that was the truth." Sorcha Eilís Blackthorn, Luna of the Blackthorn pack, was magnificent. Two souls braided into one. Two lives merged into something extraordinary. Living proof that from the darkest betrayals can come the brightest light. And they never let anyone forget it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through heartbreak and redemption, through death and rebirth, through the impossible made possible. If this story touched you, if you felt Sorcha's pain and celebrated her triumph, if you believed in the power of second chances and the strength it takes to forgive, then please hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear a story about surviving the unsurvivable, and subscribe so you never miss another tale of werewolves, magic, and the unbreakable bonds between souls. And remember, I'm still waiting to hear what city you're watching